going to make an oil painting blind, but I actually don't need this for it. Because I built something even better. This lamp right here. Because when I turn this lamp on, it's gonna turn you and I almost entirely blind. Now, once I hit this switch over here, there's no going back. You're never gonna see art again. At least not in the same way. Let's do it. It actually takes about 10 minutes to turn on. I'm mostly just excited that it didn't blow up in my face, because when I said I had to build this light, I was serious. They don't really sell these things anymore. I had to wire this myself. But this is a low pressure sodium lamp. And in order to explain more about it, I'm gonna have to turn the lights off. Now, I left one light on over there, and it's an LED light. And the way that LED lights work is they take red, green, and blue diodes together, and they mix them to create a broad spectrum of visible light, like you see happening in this portrait. But this is a low pressure sodium lamp, and it works a little bit differently. It only emits a very tiny spike of visible light, and everything outside of that spike, all these colors, they don't get rendered to the human eye. So let me turn this light off. Now look at this. This is black and white. We are almost entirely colorblind right now. This is so weird looking. I cannot tell you how trippy this is. It's not like turning a normal light down, which would reduce the amount of colors. It's turned everything into gray or brown. Let me look at this portrait again. Look at this, right? This looks like a grisaille now. It looks like an underpainting. It looks like a black and white painting. Everything is like this. The portraits on the wall behind me, everything is gray. Remember these flowers? Yellow and purple? Well, I say, let's paint them. And I also taped off the labels on my tubes, so I don't know what any of these colors are. Let's do it. Now, why are we doing this? Well, it's to test out an old dictum that color is less important than value in your paintings. Value is just the grayscale of things, how light or how dark they are. And the idea behind value over color is that value actually explains a lot about the world around us. The fact that you understand my face and what's going on right now tells us that value is pretty darn important. That's where we get the most amount of information about the world from. So the fact that this is a really flat, single light plane, and then it drops off really quickly on a sharp corner, and then we cast a shadow down onto my palette, that's telling us a lot of different information, right? It's telling us that we have a 90-degree sharp corner, that we have a light that's coming from the left, and it's casting down onto this palette. That is the idea that value actually gives us more information. It tells us more about the world, and it's probably more important than our colors in our painting. In order to test that out, we're just gonna paint completely randomly, with random colors. And then when we turn these lights back on, we'll have to see if the painting still holds up once it's in this insane, chaotic, random color. Let's continue putting down these colors, and I'm just gonna organize them based on how light or how dark they are. I'm gonna make a grayscale value chain here from darkest to lightest. We want to take this incredibly complicated flower and reduce it down to its simplest elements. So I'm gonna try to make a 5-value scale. So we have black on this end, white on this end, and then we'll have 75, 50, 25% on the value spectrum. So this is already pretty close to 75. That's a little bit too dark. We can lighten this one up a little bit. I kind of want to not mix my paint too much too, and that'll allow for some color vibration to shine through. That way everything doesn't get mixed to mud. I have no idea what I have here, so it could all just be canceling each other out and creating brown. This has an equal chance of looking beautiful as it does looking horrible. It's probably still like a 6 out of 10. I think it needs to be a little bit darker. So let's just grab one of our 3 blacks, I guess, and we'll put that in here. I have no idea what colors those are. 75%. Well, I can clean my brush a little bit. Oh, I really muddied that up. I'm an idiot. 25% light one. Grab a little bit of each over here. It's hard because different paints have different tinting strengths. And normally I know just based on the color how strong it's gonna tint the pool that I'm putting into, but I have no idea. So sometimes I put a color in and it gets way darker, way brighter, and then I'll mix a different color in and it makes almost no change at all. I think I made the exact same gray. Holy. Okay, we'll have a bunch of that. We don't need another value. Now I already have actually maybe a decent idea of what these pigments possibly could be while mixing them, and not from their pigment properties, that was a little bit harder to keep track of, but because of some really fascinating color ideas. Basically, not all colors exist at certain ranges, and I built something on my computer to show you guys this. This is the color visualizer. It's something I built in Blender. Well, with my caveman brain, I was able to build about 70% of what I wanted, and it worked good enough, but then one of the people from my community reached out. Shout out to a guy named Bamboosack, and he rebuilt this into something that's way more streamlined, so really appreciate you guys when you help me out. What we're looking at here is called a HSV cube, and this is the standard color picker that you'll see in any digital painting program. It doesn't matter if you use the square color picker or the triangle or the circle or the sliders, it's all this system. On one end of our cube here, we have our hue, and hue just means whatever color something is, right? Without caring about the value. Is something yellow? Is it green? Is it blue? Is it red? That's our hue. Grass has a green hue. Now, if we look at the next side of our cube over here, we have our saturation. Scaling left to right, we can see that we have gray on one end and then a fiery, intense saturation on the left. So we increase our saturation as we go along that side. And we could come over here too, and we could cut through this and see the different saturations of different hues. You can see it at all these different hues here. Finally, on the last side, we have our value, and we've talked a bunch about value, and we're going to talk a lot more about value today. From the bottom here, we have black, and at the top here, we have white. And as we go upwards, we increase our value. So we have pure white, pure black. That is the HSV cube. We could take this cube and map it into polar coordinates though. And now this is something that we've all seen. It's the same thing, we're just visualizing the data slightly differently. This is a color wheel. We've all seen this when we were kids. You can look at complementary colors or triads, or as you go along the edge of the color wheel, you change the hue. In the center of the color wheel is pure white or gray colors, right? We're losing saturation as we go towards the middle. And finally, one view that we don't see often of the color wheel is our side view. Our height is still tied to value. So at the bottom, we have pure black. But at the top, we don't have pure white. Remember, we should have pure white at the top because the top is 10 out of 10 value. But this is pointing out something very weird. Obviously, these colors here are very different from pure white. And this entire slice of the pie should be that bright white. This is a problem with HSV. Let me bring this into Photoshop so I can show you. Here we are, and let me sample some of these. I'll take this one here, which I think was red. We'll take this one over here. I think this was blue. Take this one. This was yellow. Look at this giant range of values on top of our HSV color wheel. This doesn't make any sense. These should all be the same. Well, that's not an issue with my math here or Blender as a program. That's an issue with the system of HSV that we use. We use a model, which is a simplification of how color works, and it's pretty useful. I'm always going to talk about hue, saturation, and value while painting because it's really understandable. But if we were to hand the task of visualizing color not to artists who need to paint, but to a bunch of scientists who will look at the rods and cones in our eyes and map them out, this is what we would get. It's called OKLab, and it's our attempt to perceptually balance colors. It's called a perceptually uniform color space. And I'll skip all the math and stuff. I'll save it for another day on how you actually get to this. But we're still maintaining the idea of black and white being our brightness scale on the vertical axes. But this time, instead of all the colors being equal to white at the top, now they're balanced non-uniformly. And that's a good thing because this is how we actually view color. And you'll see something really beautiful happen here. Yellows are a color that we can see really well, especially in the bright range. We can see that yellow is one of the brightest or the brightest color that we can see at a full saturation, which is our distance from the center here. Another color that we can see in a really broad range is green. Over here, you'll see that we can see a whole bunch of different saturated greens. It's not that short. We go down to our blues though, we're really good at seeing saturated blues, but only if they're very dark. Now, our brains have evolved to detect things in order to keep us alive.
And what's really important to staying alive? Well, it's knowing if something is a leaf or a snake. If we can eat something or get eaten by it. That's what we need to know. So we're really good at detecting a whole bunch of different greens. That's what our eyes are spectacular at. And we're also pretty good at detecting blues. We can see a decent amount of them, but they tend to be very dark. So think about our green forests and our trees and our blue oceans and our blue skies, right? But if we look at a color like red over here, red we can see in a high saturation, but it's not super important that we see a whole variety of different reds in different ranges of different brightnesses. That's not super essential for our survival. And so we're not very good at seeing really bright reds, just like we're not very good at seeing really bright blues. They're just not a color that's very important to us. So colors don't exist in the same spaces. Each color exists a different range of value that it can occupy in different saturations. And we can use this knowledge back on our palette in order to maybe have a good guess at what different colors are.
So what all of that color theory tells us is that our dark colors are more generally on the spectrum of the bluer, maybe greens, maybe purples. Our lighter colors are probably closer, especially if we have a color like this one here, which I probably need to put a little bit more down. Either of these, it has to be white or it has to be yellow, because there's just really no other colors that exist at that range. And these colors in the middle range, that's kind of a toss-up, right? They could be a lighter blue, they could be a darker yellow, they could be a very saturated red. We have no idea. Now, I need to do a drawing. I want to be the guy that just throws a bunch of paint on the canvas and sculpts out something cool. Maybe that's how a lot of you guys think of me, but that's not how I think of me. And I'm really trying to build that intuitive side to myself, but it's hard. And I'm gonna do a drawing. And I'm not going to talk about it that much because we want to get to some painting. I think that's probably a decent drawing, should be good enough. And I learned this trick from Sargent, actually, reading about him. You could use fixative to fix this drawing down, that way the charcoal doesn't mix with the paint and get everything dirty. Or you can just take a rag and you can beat the hell out of it. And now we can still see the drawing, but there's just not enough on the page to dirty our paint. That's perfect. Big brushes first. I think it's good general academic painting principles just to lay in anywhere that is black or our darkest darks first. I think that's a good idea, so that is what I will do. And that is the inside of our flowers, these kernel areas. I'm not sure what they call the inside of a sunflower. And there is some black on this one. I mean, if I squint my eyes, it's pretty close to black. I'm just gonna scrub it in loosely, and then I'll be able to easily paint over it later. I wanna kind of mass in our biggest groups first, so we'll select another big brush here. Basically, we have our background behind everything, and we have our table. Our table's a little bit darker. We can make the table this value, our 1, 2, 3 value. That makes the jar one step darker in many areas to this value, and one step lighter. And then our flower petals, or the grassy, greeny stuff, it's hard to, I don't know what to call it because I want to call them purple flowers and green leaves, but they're not purple. They're not green, they're not yellow, they're nothing, all right? They're all just gray, everything is gray, just like my life after Karen took the kids. Okay, we'll put in our background here. A little bit of solvent on the brush will make that go a little bit faster too. And I do just kind of want to generally just scrub stuff in. And that will keep it loose enough that I can repaint over it later with maybe a more correct value. Lately, I've been thinking a lot more about design and making sure that we have like nice design shapes, interesting values, kind of simplifying things down, not introducing way too much chaos early on and then not being able to control it. That's a huge issue that a lot of people run into. Not just me, but certainly I do. It's really hard to see just because this isn't the most lighting ever. You know, generally in a studio, you'd want to have a bunch of lighting. So it's kind of hard to even see what the difference between our light values is going to be and the white of the canvas. So I don't want to leave a bunch of white holes all around the canvas. So I'll do this just to help fill everything in a little bit better. Generally don't like to have to rub out stuff early at this stage. Maybe this is a result of my spontaneous experimental strategy. It's always a good plan going into a painting. Completely change your strategy to something you've never tried before at the last second. Now, this is either going to have two outcomes, right? One is that I turn the lights back on after this is done. We have a strong black and white read, hit those lights, and it looks amazing. It looks just like it did, but with all sorts of crazy colors, and it looks really interesting, and it created an awesome product, and I'm happy with it. That outcome will make me say, values are super duper important, right? Values are our most important thing, and you really can throw color to the side and do it completely randomly, and you'll still get a great result. And then the other outcome would be, I turn those lights back on and it might look kind of realistic, I'm not sure, but the colors are going to be completely insane and it's not gonna work because some of the color harmonies are strange. I'm not sure exactly which one it's gonna be, I really don't know. And I guess a little bit of it is just random chance, it's just the loot box of which colors I got on my palette here and how they mix together. I shouldn't be mixing extra tones here, but I kind of have to, right? Like, this is too dark to make these kind of darker edges along the edge of our jar, and this background is too dark to make a good contrast. So if I want it to look realistic, if I want to get my values correct, which is the whole point here, I'm gonna have to mix these colors up a little bit more. Can't just use an evenly stepped value scale. Push this towards our next gray a little bit, and we'll lay this in. That's probably much more accurate. Our goal when starting out is always to hit those big groups first, not to focus on any of the details. There's always kind of this fine line that is impossible for me to say exactly where it is or to give you some sort of prescriptive statement that's always right. And that's why we test out theories like value is more important than color, because if somebody says something that prescriptive about art, I mean, sometimes it's true, but a lot of the times the answer is it depends, or they're just totally making it up and trying to sound smart. So the edge here that is difficult to find is, how do we lay in our colors, or our values rather, in order to get our big groups right, but without adding so many different specific little changes that things get way out of hand and become too difficult to handle, and our proportions or our groups get lost. We want to get that big read without getting too sucked into the little details. I mean, that's just the challenge of art right there. It doesn't get any harder than that. One way that I can help here is I'm just gonna scrub in a lot of stuff very loosely. You can still see the grain of the canvas through what I'm doing. And what that's gonna do is put it down loose enough that I can easily repaint over it. I'm not super saturating it, but I'm still getting that general color wash in. And this top rim here of the jar is darker. Right? We wanna compare things to each other. So we have this lighter area of the jar where some of that maybe light background is wrapping around, or the light is hitting the left side here, and it's making it lighter. And then our rim, housing all of those flowers, is one of the darker parts. A little bit messier than my normal block-in, so I'm already scared, guys. I'm already scared, I'm not gonna lie. But the normal difficulty of painting is that you have to do this. You have to manage all these values in the exact same way that I am right now. But at the same time, you're managing your color relationships and you're managing your pigment properties, right? Different tinting strengths and the way that different pigments interact with each other. You're handling all these ideas of color and color theory and color harmony, all that stuff, not to make it sound too scary. And you're doing all this value stuff at the same time. It's no wonder that things get disorganized and messy while painting. I mean, it is such an unimaginably difficult task. We use this giant round messy mop here to block in maybe the darks on the inside of here. Those are these masses that appear in these dark areas between our flowers. The actual stems in the light here are much lighter. They're more of like a mid-tone gray. So here's the inside, the top of our rim of our jar. Got to remember our landmarks. Leaf on the inside of there. So finding that abstract pattern of light and dark. This value is probably pretty good for this as well, this area of the sunflower seed that is not pure black as the rest of these dark spots. So we'll move that over here. And we're always looking for just, if we can use one value in one area, where's another place where we can put that same value and kind of conserve our groups? Again, that's another area where it wouldn't be quite that easy. I mean, you are thinking about that same idea with color, but there's another level to it where, yeah, you could have two of the same values, but if one area is blue and one area is green or red, then you can't just move the same pile of paint over. You got to mix a new pile of paint that is the same value. Luckily, we don't got to deal with that. We don't got to worry our pretty little head about nothing. I think it's, in general, a good idea to kind of just to work from our big masses, right? Our big masses to our small masses, and our darks generally to our lights. So the next logical group I see is we have kind of the darks for our leafy greens in there, and now I will do the dark masses of these sunflowers, which for these two sunflowers are pretty much entirely surrounded in darkness, except for a little bit of light that hits the edges of them. So that is a good place for our mid-tone value. If I squint my eyes at it, it's a decent amount lighter than our super darks, but it's probably around this one, kind of like a 3 out of 10 or so. And this is already my mid-tone, my mid-tone brush, easy. And we'll just try to get like a nice designed shape in there. And we can always cut back into it. That's the thing, is people think oil paints are the hardest, most difficult to paint. And there's a lot of like material things about them that make them a little bit scary, probably a little bit lighter than that. But they're actually genuinely the easiest to paint. And that's because they're so forgiving. If your acrylics go down wrong and then they dry, well, tough luck. And also, those acrylics dry a slightly different value than they go down wet because they're water soluble. Watercolor's got to be one of the hardest mediums out there because you have so little control, and it takes an incredible amount of knowledge in order to be able to control it properly. Check our values. That's good. I like that value. With oil, you have an infinite amount of erasability. You can always scrape down. You can rub areas out with some solvent if things go really bad. You can really just paint right over the top. I'm not using really any solvents or any oils or anything like that. I used a little bit just for the backgrounds, but I generally don't paint with that. And I shouldn't get too specific about these shapes here. It's hard to talk and paint at the same time. There's too many things to focus on. Try to just get this big shape in first, because that's what I mean. You can always cut back into it and model it more specifically. As long as we nail that big group to start, that is what we want. So come around the edge of our dark flower in there. We might need to push some of this background in a little bit. It might be a little bit wide there, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I've kind of always been under the philosophy that if you just represent nature true enough as you see it, then the shapes design themselves, the edges edge themselves, and the values value themselves. You just need to understand nature well enough. And Bouguereau said, let nature be your only master. And I do agree to that in some way, but I've really been reconsidering what I know about art lately. A lot of that is very painful and difficult, but a lot of it I think is necessary. I think it's very important that I'm always reconsidering what I know, questioning if it's enough, if what I'm learning is working for me, if it's leading me in the direction that I want to go in, and if it's not, what adjustments do I need to make in order to make that happen. Now with our oil paint, we can cut right back on top with the background color and this thicker amount, and because it's thicker, it's going to go right on top, no problem. What I've been realizing lately is that a lot of the people that I've always looked at as masters in the realist art world and the fine art contemporary space with the ateliers, a lot of them paint incredible portraits and great academic work. But the average industry artist is able to do so much more to make incredible paintings and to make so many of them without it being such a great exhausting labor like it is for many of the realist artists. And that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories. I want to make paintings. And so I think for me, what's been a really rude and difficult awakening is the idea that I actually probably need to step away from what I love. Well, I mean, I love all of art, but what I've always been attracted to, which is more that realist art world, and consider some of the other possibilities of what's going on with the game artists, the movie industry artists. That's what I mean when I say the industry, because so many incredible teachers there, incredible painters that understand how to actually tell stories, how to design things, how to be an artist that doesn't just paint portraits, but makes art. That's opened up a whole can of worms of realizing that I'm nowhere near as good as I thought I was. Not that I ever really thought I was all that, the best, but man, there's just always so much to learn, and that's what makes painting and art so exciting. I'm really excited to be on a new journey, learning new skills, trying out new things, and I'm already trying new ideas that I've been thinking about and learning lately. There is our one big group for the mostly shadow side of that flower, and we'll do the same thing for our flower up here. Again, we'll simplify that shape. I'm not going to carve out all the little dots. We'll try to just get that general arc in, and I know I can always come out and carve out all those individual petals and points later on. Make sure I have room in these areas for that lighter paint to go down when I get those bright petals that are catching the edge of the light around there. These shapes are much more small and intricate, so I gotta be careful here. Keep track of what I'm doing. I need to understand positionally where I am in space, as if I'm tracking on top of a three-dimensional model. That's what this is. It is just a three-dimensional model. I just have to build out the vertices and render the planes myself. These petals that come out. I've almost got all of my big groups and masses laid in. Now, really, this is just like the same thing as doing a grisaille or a black and white painting or a burnt umber underpainting that some people like to do for kind of a traditional look to their paintings. Now, this will have to be part of my grander color theory video that I'll eventually make on this stuff. But I actually really don't like using those techniques all that much, just because there is really a huge amount of misinformation in how they were used historically, specifically with those techniques. They just go crazy. The word color theory online just sets people into a fervor, and they will just say the most insane ideas ever. and everyone eats it up on social media, and it's pretty frustrating to see. But the idea behind a monochrome painting is exactly what we're doing now, right? You have a really strong base in your black and white values, which should make a much more structurally sound portrait or whatever you're doing. And then on top of that, you can place your more specific colors and dial that in too on top of that base. Now, again, I'm not a huge fan of that, but it really doesn't matter. If that's how you want to learn values, then go for it. That's totally a fine way to learn. I think the best way to learn this stuff, though, is just with charcoal, because charcoal is a much more accessible medium. It's very expressive, but it's also limited, so that you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. But you don't have this overwhelming idea of using these big thick brushes and which brushes do I need, or which transparency of different pigments do I need. You don't have to worry about all that stuff that can be really overwhelming. Instead, you get this medium that's very powerful, incredibly powerful, used by all the academics in the French academies, can make incredibly expressive drawings or very tight technical renderings if you want. It's the perfect medium for your values, understanding them, and really building out fundamental skills that you can use to improve your paintings. I actually have a few really great articles written about how the old masters used charcoal in order to learn and become better painters, and a lot of them very expressive and creative painters too, not just boring academic stuff. If you guys want to check that out, and a free full portrait drawing guide that I made, check out my website, Halftone Studio. Got tons of references there too. It's really going to help you get better at visualizing the big value groups, how to put them in place first. That way you can focus on the important details at the right time instead of too early and messing everything up. So, we're getting kind of to a point here where we actually do have, I think, a lot of the big ideas down. Just got to put in a few more values. There's my stem. I think we are actually at a really nice point here. It's been a little bit over an hour, so for our first session, I think this is going to be a strong start. And I'll take a little break here now that most of this stuff is laid in, and then I can come back to this with some fresh eyes and hopefully immediately spot any weirdness going on. I'm going to keep these areas that I have to work back into thin by scraping them down with the knife. This break was helpful. I can kind of see some problems and some areas I think that are working well. I think generally, if I squint, stand back, probably look a little stupid right now, but that's just what painting is. If I squint and stand back, I think the big groups of everything are working reasonably well, actually. So that's great. That's a success in itself. Continue to lighten up these areas that they weren't quite right to begin with. And now a lot of these areas that I think just need more work, it's not that they're entirely the wrong value or that they need to be significantly darker or lighter, but just that they need to be kind of a transition, a value that's slightly a little darker, a little lighter in between two values. And so that's what I got to work out here. Continue to mix this stuff, just pull this stuff from a hard 5-value system into 5-value groups that can soften or lighten a little bit in between. That's going to allow us to create some change within the big group. When I stand back and squint my eyes, some of these shapes start to take on that appearance of the glass jar. It's a very delicate precision, and there's so many things going on. We have the refraction of the water, we have the stems that are going in there, we have the top of the water, which is a little bit darker than the sides. It's just a bunch of light bouncing around in a whole lot of different ways. I'm sure that I would be freaking out if this was in color as well, because I'd be managing hue and all that stuff right on top of it. But one thing is, though, if I want to make a distinction between two things that are the same value, I really don't have any way to do that pretty much at all. I could just have to design things. I would have to purposely make an artistic decision to make something a darker or lighter value, which, I mean, that's good design, but we have to trust my design skills, which is a little bit scary there. Whereas if we're in color and two things are the same value, but I need to differentiate them, well, that's pretty easy. I just make them different colors, right? You could have a green stem and a red vase next to it, and they could be the same level of light and dark, but one could be green and one could be red. But I lose all of that potential working like this. Okay, a few strong brush strokes here, and then let's move on. I don't want to focus too much on any one spot, but I actually do like how the read of this jar is coming from a distance. Try to paint from far back too. Kind of helps me stay focused on the big picture. Makes it easier to see stuff when I squint. Set down some of my big brushes here and move to these medium brushes, and we'll start to get a little bit more specific about some of our shapes. I think that areas like in here could be a little bit lighter than they are right now. There's kind of more subtle transitions in there. Of course, we need to carve out those more specific shapes of the petals in these areas as well. So let's do that. Now, the actual lights of the flower petals, where the light's hitting it very strong, it's pretty much pure white, or as bright as this light will let us go. That is almost certainly going to be white or yellow. I don't have a lot of other tubes of paints that are within that value range. I don't really buy a whole lot of convenience colors, which are colors that can be mixed by hand, just on your palette like this from primary colors. I tend to just work from primary colors and then a couple convenience colors. Normally paint with about maybe 5 or 6 paints at a time, sometimes more if I have a really wide palette for a painting that just needs a whole bunch of different colors. But most paintings don't need a million different colors on the palette. And because we scraped that paint underneath, it's nice and thin, and it allows us to put this white over, or this yellow, I really have no idea to be honest, this very light flower petal color on top, no problem. And that is just the easiness of oil paint. And this really is the phase of oil painting where you have to slow down. You have to be willing to be patient. It can't all be super fun, messy, block in, just throw down the approximate color and location of everything. There has to be times where you move fast, and those have to be balanced out times where you can even out the tempo by moving very slow, being much more precise. And I'm still moving quickly here. I'm still working in big shapes, but if I just try to race through this and don't focus on precision at all, then it's gonna be a little bit of a mess. It's gonna get to a point where it's just too difficult to fix. And I've been real lazy in that category lately. So it's something that I gotta improve and just pay attention to kind of my big shapes and what matters most. I missed a big proportional issue here. The shape of this inner kernel area is very triangular. And mine was a little bit too rounded, which was gonna be a big issue. If that was super rounded, it would imply that the flower was facing more towards us, which would flatten out the whole painting. That's just not a compromise that I wanna make here, especially not this early. There is light on the petals of these flowers over here, but we actually compare the value of these petals right here against the value of the light petals over here. These ones are much darker. They're pretty much in the group of this kind of mid-tone, and there is only one petal that's receiving close to that full light. So let's not get carried away, and instead we'll mix up kind of a light mid-tone, a little bit closer to the lights, add a little bit of that brightness to it. I'll just grab a random pigment too. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. That value should be pretty good. A little bit lighter, but I just don't want to overdo it. Keep our groups separate and unique. That way they read well. Yeah, I like that. That should be pretty good. One of my biggest challenges here is actually separating the background from the lights on the flowers. They're very close in value, and they kind of trade places, and it would be easy because the flowers should be yellow and the background is paper drawings on the wall, so it should probably be like a coolish white. It'd be very easy. We wouldn't really even need to separate the value all that much. But here we have to make a really strong distinction because it's all we have. And it makes things very difficult, very confusing. I'm dealing with a lot of these intermediate values, and that has a big risk of taking away from the effect of the whole. If I get too sucked in on chopping everything up, I could kind of forget about what's important. What I'm most nervous for is going to be carving out the little spots of light that come through all those little individual stems inside of this dark mass in the middle here. To be honest, that's something that I've encountered a lot while painting landscapes and trying to paint more complex subjects, especially plants. It's something I haven't really figured out yet. That's just something I don't know. It's not, I can paint a decent portrait. I know a lot about the human figure. You don't deal with that problem on the human figure quite as much, where you have all of these chaotic, tiny little shapes. If you try to chase down every little shape and put them in perfectly, it's just too difficult. You're never gonna get all the shapes right. And things just start to get kind of messy and they blur together, and it's just never worked out for me. So I'm not sure exactly how to tackle that problem. And I guess I'll try to come up with an interesting solution this time. Probably won't work. Something I'm gonna have to ask one of my more experienced counterparts about. One of the most frustrating parts about art, if you're determined to improving yourself and getting good, that means you can't just get good at the things that you're naturally good at or that you like doing. You have to get good, more importantly, at the things that you're bad at. And for me, slowing down, being precise in areas that I need to, it's always a fight. Always something I have to remind myself, and frequently I'll forget. For a little while, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm slowing down a lot and it's helping, I'm getting better. And then I'll stop doing it because I get too comfortable. I'm like, all right, I got it now. I figured out this whole pacing thing. And then my paintings will slowly get sloppier and worse. And then I'll realize I'll have enough pain eventually to realize that I need to go back and re-remember that lesson. And I think that's probably just a pendulum I'm always going to swing on. And that's just a natural part of the artistic process. I mean, I mentioned I've been having a whole lot of self-doubt and pain and difficulty over what I know and the skills that I've learned over the past 5 or so years, 6 years of doing art, realizing how far there is still left to go, trying to face up against that daunting task. It is tough to go through big periods of change and realization, but that's just kind of the magic of art. And I think the worst thing you can do to yourself is be risk averse. That's the number one challenge with some students, with most artists, is that we tend to find something that we're good at, maybe naturally, or we develop a skill, we do the hard part for one thing, and we make it such a grand labor, such a big deal that we did the hard part for one thing. We don't want to expose ourselves to that sort of risk and challenge again. And so we become very risk averse. We try everything we can to avoid those risks. And it's just such a difficult thing to deal with, because once you become kind of complacent, once you become happy with one thing, doing anything else becomes far lower than the level you're at. If you're really good at drawing people, but you've never actually practiced drawing horses or anything, there are some skills that translate depending on the way that you train. I'm talking, painting at the same time leads to many mistakes. These are not pure white. These are, this maybe, but certainly not this. Then when you go and you try to do something that's you're not used to, you're gonna be way below your normal skill level of what you normally practice. And then all of a sudden, you'll feel like, well, I know I'm not this bad at art. I know I can draw really good people, so why do I suck so much at drawing horses or whatever? This is totally not a personal experience. And it can trigger a sort of negative feedback cycle where you slowly wind yourself more and more and more and more into a niche, and you become more and more averse to taking the risks needed to actually build out broader skills and try new things and challenge the ideas you've already had. So I think if there's anything to avoid with art, it's to always challenge yourself, do the stuff that hurts, because the broader debt that you build up through narrowing yourself into a niche by avoiding the things that you're not as good at, you either will succumb to that debt and become stagnant as an artist, which is fine, by the way. If you're just making art for fun, then don't listen to a guy like me who spends every moment of his life in the existential ecstasy and dread of art. But those fears they'll begin to ruin your mind. They will cage you up, and you'll either just do one thing forever, or you'll have to bite the bullet and pay off your grand accumulated debt of not doing a variety of different things. It can be really, really challenging mentally. Certainly something that I'm going through a lot right now. I'm not immune to this either, just because I teach or have a YouTube channel or anything. It doesn't matter if you've been painting for 30 years. Some of the most incredible artists that I know are all like this. And I don't have any super concrete advice for you. I think the only way that you can conquer that is just to build in your own mind ways to recognize that you might be avoiding things, not because you don't like them or you don't want to do them, but just because they hurt to do. You have that debt. Time to start paying it off. The long-term gains will be certainly worth the short-term pain. Learning anything as giant as art, whether that be music or chess or whatever it is that you're passionate about, mindfulness is a really important component of that it doesn't get talked about quite as much, because not all gains can be gotten through pure pragmatism. Sometimes we already have a lot of the knowledge in ourselves, and we just need to understand it and access it in a different way. A lot of you guys just need to practice your cast drawing, though, and practice your figure drawing and develop a regular routine of drawing. And if you want a head start of that, check out my course, Everything You Need to Know About Drawing. If you don't think I'm all that good, well, I brought the guy who taught me how to draw. Been drawing for 20 years, an incredible artist. We taught a course together, and it's really good. It's a really, really strong, fundamental, basic set of skills that I think you guys would really enjoy. Or just get the free stuff on the website, too. And we're still working on that primary task of just knocking out those big groups, the big relationships. It's just that now that we're at this stage, we get to work a little bit smaller. We get to think about what's the relationship of maybe not individual petals. I mean, we are kind of picking away at individual petals, especially that's literally exactly what I'm doing right now, but also relationships of a group of petals, a side of petals to another side of petals. Whereas on that first run, we were thinking more about what's like the biggest picture idea that we can possibly get across. Now we get to go into those more like medium relationships, and that's nice. You guys might not be able to get a relationship in real life, but at least you can do it in art. That's something. Well, only if you focus on your values at least. All right, these are begging for a little bit of fan brushing, some intermediate tones to smooth over some transitions. So that is what we will do. I'm just gonna pull a middle tone in between two groups together in order to make a smoother transition. And of course, we don't want to turn all of our transitions smooth, so I'm gonna find an equal amount of strong, harder value changes, still fitting within those big groups, right? We're not like getting all over the place and putting pure black as the dark of our petals. Just because a petal has a shadow doesn't mean it's the same as the shadow on the seed kernel in the middle, right? That seed kernel, the light on it is gonna be like 2 out of 10, really close to black, and the shadow is gonna be pure black. A petal, it's gonna be the exact opposite. A light on it's gonna be pretty much close to white, and a shadow on it might only be like 6 out of 10. And this truly is my favorite brush, the fan brush. Everyone used it back in the day. It's hella overrated nowadays. Not a lot of people are fan brushing it, but I think everyone should be fan brushing it, man. It's such a good brush just to block in colors if you want, or to transition one color into another. It's really great for that. I don't like to call it blending because we're not like taking a soft makeup brush or badger brush or whatever and like slowly tickling it in. No, we're still respecting our value groups. We're just pushing an edge here or there. And that oftentimes makes for much more realistic blending than a bunch of airbrushing. I think I can count on one hand the amount of paintings in my life that I've been like, yeah, that was easy. I think none come to mind. Let me back up. I just gotta keep backing up further until it looks good. Yeah, a bit overworked. I don't know. Petals here at the edge of the flower pretty much are the exact same tone as the background. So I'm not sure exactly what to do about that. There's certainly a creative decision. And one of those creative decisions is just, letting it be, throwing some paint down. And maybe we'll get some color variation by chance. Just want to apply some details into the vase now. Keep myself moving over these flowers. They're in an okay spot. It's not a multi-day painting. I'm just trying to make a sketch here, maybe 3 or so hours, and get that kind of general effect down. And I think the values are like pretty on. They feel reasonably accurate. I think the sketch is coming along. And I need to imply a lot of detail if I'm not actually gonna put it in. So no medium or anything on the brush here. A little bit of oil wouldn't hurt, but we're raw dogging it. And sometimes you just gotta raw dog. You gotta know when the time's right for that. I think implying details is all about just knowing where the right place to make accent marks is. And accent marks are just some of the most overlooked and powerful tools in all of art. If you have kind of a big value group right, and you've put in a proper accent it can imply so much more than finely rendering out that form ever could. And really, you need to know where to place those because you just can't put in every detail into every painting. You have to make decisions in your art. That's much too light. It's a little bit too light, it's not that. And you can't just put in everything. That can't be your decision, or if it is your decision, then that's awesome, and you will have a great career making 10 paintings in your entire life. But the rest of us who want to actually put out a quantity of work that allows them to express their voice and also maybe have a career, you gotta work quickly. And that means knowing where to put your accents, knowing how to simplify things, to distribute your details properly, knowing where to break up that chaos, and also know where to just let it be chaos. It's something that's very, very difficult. And I think I could use some of those same accents in some of the folds of my flowers. Gotta be careful, I don't wanna put too much information, but there's kind of this nice like triangle. Some sharper lines will attract attention. There's kind of a high density of attention right in here, so that naturally makes a focal point. And then there also is like a higher density of information right here. And then lastly, there will be right around here, and it kind of creates this little triangle here that I'd like to guide the viewer through the painting with. So that's maybe where I'll focus some of this detail and rendering. Accents not just with our darks, but with our lights as well. Just those little corners of these petals which catch that strong light. Get a little bit on this next one here too. There are some very complicated leaf structures here as these petals are turning and curling, and yeah, it's actually not easy, or it's not nice to deal with at all. This is a very mean area by this flower. Now we have a good level of detail in the flowers to the point where I'm reasonably happy. At least has a decent read from a distance. Now we need to tackle these things. And there's so much chaos in them. I'm honestly not 100% sure how to, I don't know how to approach anything. I just do it, all right? So I'm just gonna do that strategy, I suppose. What am I looking at? How do we deal with anything? We group them together, and then we slowly break up those groups. So that's what we're gonna do. With this one, we have a slightly lighter gray that's hitting the left side of it here, and then this stuff is pretty much all black. Put in our darkest value into this group. These are the undersides of the flowers. We have these like very flat tops that get this very dark accent on the bottom. All right, we gotta like carve out those light shapes in here. I don't want to scrape too much of my flower. All right, thick brush, thick paint, background color. Let's just try to carve in some like interesting shapes, I suppose. Like semi-abstractly, and then we can kind of just like layer some accented dark brush strokes on top to imply. And I'll try to vary my shape design too. So, you know, I have a good balance of shapes that are squarish, some that are more round, some that are more triangular, some that are larger, some that are smaller. I have like a little bit too much of like a big, medium, small thing going on here, which is generally good. It's very hard to make sense of theory that is so deep into abstraction, because there's just so many places where you can break the rules and have it still work fine. So, you know, these two are probably a little bit too similar. So I could either like break that up, maybe we'll just push that in a little bit just to vary it, and we'll run like a few branches across thereafter. And I'm not just like making these shapes up. I mean, these shapes are there, but they're already heavily abstracted by all the leaves and little stems that run through them. Some level of design is required no matter what, whether you want to be cognizant of it or not. If you're not cognizant of it, then you're just going to be like chasing down an impossible amount of little tiny shapes. It's really hard to differentiate all the different tones through here. We have the side of the sunflower stalk right here. That's lighter than, it's the lightest part, and then you get the light side of the leaves of the lavender flowers next, and then you get the darker, black or almost black shadowed parts of the leaves, and then you're also kind of fighting against the background values. So you have like 4 or 5 values that like weave in and out of each other. You try to make sense of it, man. It's harder than it looks. That's why I think landscapes are such a strong skill to build. The human figure, it trains you how to build some level of abstraction, but not to the level that landscape does. Ultimately, I'm just on a mission to be able to tackle anything, no matter how hard that is. And it's really hard. It's really hard. I should have become a doctor or something. I've really been at this for almost, around 6 years now, and it's still like so much to learn. I mean, the 10-year rule really is true, especially, if you're like me and you're like self-taught and taking online classes and stuff, then normal person working a normal job takes extra long. But if you just try to like speed run it because you have the privilege to go to a school full time or something, there's other issues that come of that as well. Generally because a school only teaches kind of a narrower range or a way of thinking, and it can lead to limitations further into the future. I think some of the best artists are people that traveled around, got a variety of different educations from a variety of different sources, and was able to weave something that was kind of uniquely their own out of that. From, the fundamental things that come from each style. Great spot for the texture of the fan brush. Kind of let that naturally do a lot of the work. I've been enjoying digital for the first time ever because I've kind of slowly been learning that you can let texture do some things for you instead of just manually painting everything by matching the colors and tones perfectly and getting, understanding the form perfectly and kind of drawing it all in. And that's a really good way to work academically. But again, you making art sometimes requires decision making, and you don't got the time to just include everything and to do everything the hard way. So it's been nice to learn some of the intermediate ways or ways that you can be more clever with your knowledge. And I don't think that has to be mutually exclusive with having a deep understanding too. Combining the two often yields the best results. And I'll take the fan brush with some background color here as well, just to do exactly what I'm doing to get the texture, but in the opposite direction. I'm gonna be lazy on these. I don't care, man. I really, really, really wanna see what colors this even is. You know what? Yeah, that's like a little bit over 3 hours. It's like just over 3 hours. Maybe 3.5 actually with the drawing, so kind of start to finish. Let's turn some lights on. I have no idea. When I went out to wash my hands the first time, I haven't been out since, I had like blue and green on my hands. So I'm guessing there's a lot of like saturated blues and greens, maybe phthalo green, which is super saturated, dark green. Maybe that's one of those dark colors. Here is our finished sketch after about 3 hours or so. All I have to do now is turn on this light.
Now, before the grand reveal, I just want to say I actually did this whole video twice, and I have a whole separate painting for channel members if you want to see it. If you like this process and you want to see more of a casual commentary over it, then you guys can click below, become a channel member, and help support me in this channel. I'm really trying to move in a specific way right now. That way I don't reveal what is behind me. But to be honest, being a YouTuber, it's not the easiest. I got 1.5 million views on the short of the video last week. I think I made like $150 off of this. So channel members are a huge amount of support for the channel. They keep the videos coming and they keep this alive. So if you like the content, you want some bonuses, or you just want to support the channel, then consider hitting the membership join button below.
Okay, here goes nothing. Oh, what the? What am I looking at? Wow. I mean, I would have never come up with these different color combinations here. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. Oh my God, look at the color palette. Let's get in close on this. Okay, so when I put more paint into my palette, look what happened. These two were so close in value, I didn't actually even see the difference. And we had a total clown fiesta palette. So yellow and white, I just mixed together because I couldn't see that much of a difference between them. I didn't even realize. Then I had orange, bright red. I had this must be emerald green, and then the cerulean blue. This looks like maybe ultramarine. No, that's dioxazine purple here. And then this is, what is that? Do I even own that color? That might be something, I think that's a couple colors mixed together. This is all, What color? I don't even own that color. Oh, this must be, okay, this must be Viridian. So this is Viridian green, which is a really bluish dark green, very saturated. And then this is ultramarine blue right over here. And so we had in these very dark mixes here, a lot of these really bluish cool tones, and that carried its way down into here. You get a lot of grays in the middle because the oranges cancel out that blue, and then yellows in the lights, just like we suspected. I didn't even have a black in the palette. What I thought was black was actually just purple and Viridian green, which actually are very transparent. And so now that the light's on, I can see that they're not actually even all that dark, that you can still kind of see some of the canvas showing through beneath them. And when I have this sepia light on, it really isn't that strong. Kind of painting under one light that no matter how strong it is, it just doesn't evenly illuminate everything. And so that kind of brought the general exposure level down, and it made all of my darks much darker when I was painting over there. Now that we have a nice softbox light on that's much more evenly lighting this, it's a totally different experience looking at it because we have a different level of exposure. I really like how a lot of these color choices came together. It's actually super interesting. No one in their right mind would ever use this clown fiesta palette with orange and green as kind of the primary driving colors, orange and yellow. That's completely absurd. I would have never done that. But there's like a strange charm to it. And I especially really like the orangey backgrounds in here and having this yellow, brown, green layered on top of it. That's really interesting. I mean, I would never really make that decision, but it looks so cool. I love how saturated we are up in that corner and how these fizzle out. And look how much more contrast we have in our bright lights in our leaves now. Because yes, value is important. It's very important. It makes things feel 3D. But there's a whole world of color out there that changes the expression and the feeling of things. And it also has a lot of different subtle form effects. You know, we need color in order to be able to see the subtle differences between two things that are alike. So they're both important in different ways. I still think that value is very important as a painter. Probably especially as a beginner, you really need to focus on your drawing skills and your value, but don't overlook color too. You can always practice your color skills no matter where you are. There's a lot of people out there in the art world who are gonna say things that sound like absolute truths. They're gonna say statements that you have to follow, you have to do this method, you have to treat your lights this way, you have to work in this amount of layers. But I really encourage you guys to challenge things, try them out yourself, go touch the hot stove burner, because yeah, it might be hot, but it also might not be. And a lot of people out there, especially in the art world, are saying things that they've heard that they haven't tested themselves. And it's art at the end of the day. So go out there and experiment and find what works for you, because it's gonna be different for other people. Even though there are some fundamental truths that will carry through, there's a lot that, it's shaky. Like we learned here, is value important? Yeah, it's super important. But color plays a really strong role too, and this is not the same painting as it was under that light. Thanks for watching.